Hi, everyone. Welcome to our session, The Disruption and Reinvention of Media and Entertainment. I'm Samira Bakhtiar, the Director of Commercial Sales in the AWS Media and Entertainment vertical. And in this capacity, I have the privilege of leading a highly passionate team of architects, sellers, and consumer evangelists to get the privilege of serving some of the largest media conglomerates in the world. I'm joined today here with my peer, Eric Iverson, the Director of Media and Entertainment. Eric, can you tell the audience a little bit more about what you do?
Yeah, I'm here. I play kind of the role of looking after some of our competency areas, working with some of our customers on innovation. As a former CIO, CTO, I get to work on some of the biggest and juiciest problems with some amazing peers here at AWS.
I love it. So why don't we move forward, Eric, to the agenda, and then we can kick off here across the M&E space.
Fantastic. I'm so glad to be here today. We have a great agenda. Three things that we really want to cover off with you. We're gonna go over a quick overview of media and entertainment for a few of you out there that may be new to our crazy industry that we love so much. Second is we're going to go over some really big disruptions in reinvention that's happening because of just a lot of turbulence in our industry. But that also creates a lot of excitement, which gets to my favorite conversation, Samira. You know, we love to talk about customer stories here at AWS, and we just have some great stories here today. Usually our problem is trying to figure out which ones to talk about, but I couldn't be more excited about that. So let's get off. We're going to, Samira, why don't you take us through for the audience that may not know media and entertainment as well. Could you just take us through a little bit? When we say media and entertainment here at AWS, what do we mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we talk about AWS and media and entertainment within AWS, it spans everything that you see here on the slide today. We're providing solutions that are aiding our customers, for an example, in the studio space with MGM, Amazon Studios, Untold Studios, and Method Studios. We're going to talk a bit more through the end of this presentation about how we've been able to really enable business continuity through remote production, which is a really exciting use case, Eric, that I know you're going to dive into. We also partner with direct-to-consumer and streaming providers. It's really important for us to note that all the major streaming providers are currently running their platforms on AWS. This includes Disney Plus, Discovery Plus, Peacock, Netflix, HBO Max, as well as Amazon Prime Video. And we're doing this both for live and VOD-based services. Additionally, we partner with broadcasters like Viacom, CBS, NBC Universal, ABC, and Fox. We enable live sporting events through the F1, the PGA, the NHL, and of course the NFL. And we also enable publishing with companies like the Wall Street Journal. We did some really cool stuff with them during the elections as it pertained to fact checking, which was really, really exciting. We also partner with news, music, radio, and live event organizations as well. So Eric, with so many different customer types and use cases, I think the audience would really appreciate an overview of how exactly we're enabling them. Could I ask you to walk through the how in terms of how AWS is engaging in this capacity?
Oh, I'd love to. I love this topic. First of all, I just love media and entertainment. I mean, there's nothing more human than just the whole art of storytelling and the drama. It's what makes life and so rich every day. And so, covering these areas about how do we help every one of those segments of media entertainment we just talked about. And so I think starting off with like live content production and scripted content production and unscripted content production, we're spending a lot of time in that space, everything from the planning part all the way through capture. And we're doing that in both of those two areas, both in live, which we're seeing a lot of reinvention. So that's everything from, remote production to traditional studio production and trying to find new ways to that, which actually takes us into things like remote production that we're doing these days. And then trying to figure out how do we get more of that actually into the cloud and freeing up some of our artists out there to be able to be more creative and spend more time actually working on content and less time trying to figure out how to actually get to the job. And so that includes things like trying to figure out how editorial processes work, visual effects, and taking us all the way through color grading, finishing, and mastering. And that's a really great area. And the second that leads us into is once we're done with actually getting that through like the first part of the supply chain, we need to get this moved around to its destinations. And so we spend a lot of time in media supply chain as well, helping out kind of our customers. And that's a whole process, everything from right up front when we're kind of doing title management, metadata management, all those things before we actually even have content, through actually grabbing the content, storing it, media asset management, all the way through kind of endpoints on distribution, getting the localization to happen, or globalization as we like to call it these days. And then we move that on to distribution, where we all care about it, where our eyeballs finally meet these experiences and we're delighted. And we're doing that across broadcast, which is going through just tremendous innovation right now as it's moving into kind of its next phase. So we see that with broadcast operations play out. We have some great stories on that today. We're seeing that with innovations on direct to consumer, which has just taken off over the last 2 years. And that's just been a really exciting space. And these are complex areas where we have to carry about things from subscriber management, the customer. We're getting closer to the customer in these cases. What's the UX experience for that? Experience becomes really important. And how do we drive really great experiences? How do we collect the analytics for that on the back end so that we know what that experience is like? Which is a perfect segue into our last area, into data sciences. And what we've seen is from our customers is to support all of these areas up above, we really want to leverage analytics and data sciences to help all these areas. So we're seeing everything from supporting even on the content and live production space, like how does analytics happen in live production? And we'll talk about some examples of that. But you've been seeing things like that if you've been watching, let's say like the NFL, where we all of a sudden are able to bring machine learning directly into the consumer experience, and that's kind of touching us at that live capture. And how do we do that when we do content ingest? And how do we do machine learning on that content ingest, and doing anything from like transcription to recognition on assets, where you see things like logo detection, and then even being able to support other kind of workflows as we get into kind of distribution around the world. And that's pretty exciting. And of course, we have this tremendous platform. When as a former customer, it was just so great having such a great broad toolbox like AWS to be able to do your core analytics work, so that you could do things like everything from green lighting a film all the way through kind of whatever its performance is, and help you make good decisions when it comes into distribution. So these are just like incredible areas of innovation. And if you went to talk about some of the actual customers that we talk about, I mean, this is, Samira, the challenge is every time we put up one of these logo pages, we can never figure out who to put on the page, because there's just so many great names. But since we're going to talk about a couple of them today, we have Untold Studios, down in the left-hand corner. They're just doing tremendous work. We're going to talk about them. Method Studios definitely have been visionaries for a long time. Weta Digital, look at some of these great companies that we get to innovate in the space, and we're inventing on exactly those things that we just talked about. And then when you get into the media supply chain area, you definitely have market movers in there, everywhere from companies that have been doing it for a long time, like Deluxe. But we're going to talk about what Fox has been doing, in this space, as well as CBS Viacom, which you see kind of on in the next box, and then and Fox has just been doing tremendous work. And when you get to that last box, where you see some just really great household names between Hulu and Netflix, Sky, and then of course Samira, Peacock has just been doing some really, really innovative work. Talk about a company that has coming out of like that ad space, where they have kind of that new combination of both ad supported VOD as well as subscription supported VOD. So they're doing wonderful innovation there. And then if you get into that last bucket, like I said before, if you've been watching the NFL, you've already been seeing some of the work that we're doing there. Formula One, if you're a Formula One fan, just really cool opportunities to have analytics meet that live experience. And then just other things in other industries you see, like with News Corp has just done some really wonderful work leading into the election. So I just love this page. And Samira, what it makes me think is like, you probably have some people in the audience here today. It's like, okay, it sounds like you're doing everything with everybody. That doesn't sound possible. So Samira, what is it? Make this more believable for us. How would we scale? And are we doing this by ourselves, or do we have friends along the way?
That's a great question. And I would like to say we're very popular. So we got a lot of friends in this space that are helping us, Eric. So let me walk you through that. So this talks about our vetted technology solutions. And let me first start off by saying that AWS has more services and functionality than any other cloud provider, and that's by a lot. Our business is innovating at a faster clip, especially in the areas of artificial intelligence and machine learning, serverless, microservices, storage, next-gen computing, and networking, and then, of course, in media workflows as well, which is a big part of the topic here today. We also have unmatched experience, maturity, reliability, and performance, as we've been operating 6 to 7 years before any other cloud provider. And I tell you all of this because it's really important for the audience to know that we have the core services and the building blocks to enable developers end to end. That said, we totally recognize that not all customers have the same engineering resources across this industry, so it's really important for us to be able to partner to enable our customers to move fast. So to that end, we're very proud to have the largest and most vibrant community of partners to serve customers of all sizes. And this means you don't have to start from scratch, as we have solutions that can provide flexibility to serve customers wherever they're at in their journey. And Eric, I want to share 3 examples today. So the first is the AWS Solutions Library. So this offers a collection of cloud-based templates that are pre-created for you as a baseline architecture and code artifacts. And this helps to serve as a starting point for teams to rapidly build. And let me give you an example. One of the templates that we have within our AWS Solution Library is called Media to Cloud. So let's say you have a use case where you have a large media asset archive that you want to move to the cloud because you really want to enable these next-gen supply chain ambitions, but you don't have the engineering acumen on your team to code it from scratch. Well, AWS has the Media to Cloud template, which you could download from this library, that would provide the initial checksums and artificial intelligence and machine learning for metadata extraction and the ability for you to be able to move large amounts of media to the cloud rapidly. So this essentially helps an organization be able to move without writing their own code, and it enables fast migrations and rapid deployment. So it's pretty cool. So beyond technical templates and solutions, we also have the AWS Partner Network. So this is our global community of partners who leverage AWS solutions and services to aid our customers. And we proactively work with these independent software vendors, ISVs, or global systems integrators, often called GSIs, to make sure their solutions are ready to run on the AWS cloud. As an example, specific to the media space, we've partnered with ISVs in the broadcast playout space, like Evertz, Amagi, and Imagine. We've also partnered with ISVs across live production, like Grass Valley and VizRT. Additionally, we are partnering with content and film production ISVs to really enable, the visions of the creatives. And so you'll see companies like Adobe, Autodesk, and Blackmagic partnering with us. And there are so many others that we're partnering with across the data sciences space to enable M&E. And then there's GSIs like SDVI, Accenture, and PwC, to name a few, that are also helping us enable these customer journeys. So the last thing I wanted to talk about here on the slide was AWS Marketplace, which is our digital catalog, which has thousands of software listings from independent software vendors that makes it really easy for customers to search, find, test, buy, deploy software that runs on AWS. So we're trying to really remove all of the blockers that would enable customers to be able to move to the cloud pretty rapidly through the use of these creative partners. And I tell you all this because I think the main point here is that customers have choice. So customers like Netflix, as an example, they love to build their own products using AWS services end to end as building blocks. While companies like Discovery and Fox, they've chosen to use AWS services augmented by partners like Evertz and Grass Valley to enable similar outcomes. So wherever you're at in your journey, you've got some choice. So Eric, that's a lot about vetted technology solutions. I actually wanted to pivot now to talk about some of the disruption and reinvention that we've seen in the industry over the course of the last 12 months. So let's get going on disruption and reinvention. So when I look back at the last 12 months, Eric, several things stand out for me, but I really want to focus on 2 that are outlined on the left-hand side of this slide. The first is the acceleration of digital transformation, and the second is the innovation around direct-to-consumer. So Eric, when you think about these major disruptors, can you walk the audience through how you believe it's forced reinvention in the industry over the course of the last 12 months?
Oh, absolutely. It's been really exciting because I think if you look at those 2 things, at its core, what we've been in is this increasing war for eyeballs, and it's been really exciting to see that so much more content being produced in so many different ways and reaching so many more audiences, and that's really exciting. And at the same time, what that means is that we have to be able to reach creators in more places to help with that storytelling. So that's driven a lot of remote production work when we have so much more choice. So if you think about things like digital transformation, which is actually driven direct to consumer, I know the last year has been quite the interesting year of 2020. But if you look before 2020, we were already in a big movement already to direct to consumer. If you think of like some of the great launches that happened over the last 12 to 18 months, where Disney Plus and Peacock and HBO Max and Hulu. Being a mainstay, and Netflix being a mainstay, all of a sudden that's become a real thing. And what's that driven? That has driven the ability for us to be more aware of the kind of content and niche markets that people would want. So what is that going to do? It's going to say we need have the ability to have production groups in more places to be able to kind of facilitate that. So that's driven a lot of focus in remote production. And I'm glad that you talked a little bit about some on the partner side, because that's when you're supporting those things, it takes quite a few number of those partners. We'll talk about that a little bit later to be able to kind of support that area. And then the other thing that is coming out of that is even more variations of premium and diverse content. And so once we really understand kind of what the consumer wants, as I mentioned, it not only drives that remote production, but it becomes a kind of a feedback loop where now we understand, we see what people are consuming, we see that they're consuming these different areas, and then that actually drives, of course, more feedback loop to kind of go back into the remote production area. And so we're gaining a lot more analytics, and that's happening right now. And that's really, really interesting to see. But Samira, you know what's kind of interesting is that, and I alluded to this, but it was kind of the Wild West going into 2020 already. And I think that's what a lot of people forget, is that our industry, with those two big movements that were happening, with this kind of move to the cloud, and driving some direct to consumer, but also driving already remote workflows, we were moving in that direction prior to 2020. But then 2020 happened, and guess what? All of a sudden, we had these two new disruptors to our industry, and one of them with COVID, we found in this particular case, it actually drove a lot more of that kind of digital transformation work, because guess what? Remote production all of a sudden became almost the only way of production for a lot of our customers and for our industry. And so all of a sudden, where we went from a situation where people thought that remote production was a really nice to have, all of a sudden it became the only way that we could actually make production work and happen. And that's been really exciting, because that's actually opening new doors actually back to on that content diversity area, which if you go down to the second thing is we've been really focused on social justice in and out, but over 2020, everybody has to admit, that was a reawakening of this issue where we just must do better. And that drives both focus on content, but who is also participating in the industry. And so if you look at those two things, again, being able to be anywhere in the world, these are big drivers that have taken us further to not only just be everywhere in the world from a content point of view, but to be everywhere in the world for the creator as well, so that we could actually get those stories from everywhere else. So Samira, with these two additional big disruptors that we had, what are some of the things that you're seeing across some of our customers?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think that's a great segue, right? Talking about COVID and social justice and its impact. I think the big takeaway has been that without these in-person experiences, our customers have had to really find other ways to engage and augment that audience experience. And this means taking a full view of consumers' wants and needs and rapidly addressing them to drive new content, which will aid in new subscriptions. We talked about direct to consumer, but also in aiding advertising revenue as well. So this reinvention has manifested itself in my mind in two ways specifically. So the first is this focus on audience experience through interactivity. And when I think of interactivity, it kind of goes back to the point about social justice. It's about inclusion and hearing from one another and being able to ensure that like all voices have a platform to be heard. So what we're seeing is that our customers really want to enable this interactivity through social and digital experiences, and it's resulting in creating more intimacy with the audience in our post-COVID world. And AWS has been really instrumental in this, Eric, specifically enabling the technology with our interactive video stream service, IVS, which was built off of the IT stack from Twitch, a company that we had acquired, which is widely considered the example in driving social interactivity with hundreds of millions of concurrent viewers. So we could learn a lot from that tech, and we've been really excited to be able to extend that to our customers so they can leverage that in the journey of really focusing on that audience experience. And then the second area of reinvention that we're seeing is that studios are also starting to develop technology centric to creating that 360-degree view of the consumer. And it's pretty obvious, right? The more we know about our desired demographics that we're trying to target, the more niche and compelling content we're able to release to them rapidly now, based off of some of the things that you were talking about, as well as our ability to be able to target these customers for marketing and ad-related engagements. So I really feel like this is manifesting itself into the need to better leverage data across corporations in order to unlock business differentiating insights. And we'll talk a bit more about that in the upcoming slides. So Eric, you alluded to a lot of really cool and dynamic use cases. I thought we could walk the audience now through some of our customer innovations that have really set the tone for the last year. in that construct of disruption and reinvention. So, Eric, do you mind kind of walking me through some of the ones that were some of your favorites across the space?
I love it. So I can't wait. So yeah, we're gonna. This is kind of my favorite part, and we're gonna talk about several different customer stories. I'm looking forward to kind of talk about three right now that all have to do with invention and reinvention that's happening right now because of some of that disruption. And the first one I want to highlight is Untold Studios. And this is why this is really exciting is that there's nothing more magical than when you get a group of creatives to get together and they ask that what if question. What if we could take a creative studio and do the whole thing in the cloud? What if we could think about bringing that future to the present right now? And they reached out to us and they asked that big what if question of us, and that's what they set out to do. They wanted to basically create a full creative end-to-end studio, completely free of on-prem, and do that in the cloud. And that's exactly what they did. And so they've really been the first ones to do this. They're fully live. And one of the things that's really excited about this is getting back to it almost touches almost every single one of those trends, which is being able to support creatives wherever they are. That's actually more inclusive. So if you talk to the team, so like Sam and Annie, they have this great vision of being able to like find talent anywhere in the world, and they today now can actually spin up a creative workstation anywhere where they can find some of the best talent, and they could do that in 2 minutes. That's really incredible. And not only that, one of the things that they really appreciate about and what they're finding out now after they've done all of this is that they could actually stay current on the latest hardware. And that's easy because they're on a pay-as-you-go model now. So when they find out, it's like, hey, great, we have a new instance of new graphics instances coming throughout. They can actually just go ahead, and if they want to, they can choose to kind of instantly upgrade. And that's a really important thing for their creative processes. So they've been able to do that, and they're doing this across the board. They're not only just doing this in the studio. It's not just being able to launch a workstation. They're also doing that for storage, rendering. They have really great creative rendering projects that they're doing in the animation space. And they're also doing that for backup. And they've worked with companies like Wekai.io to really help with that very fast storage management. And this has been a really big success. And I'm super excited about the work that they've been doing. But just being able to be able to deploy the resources wherever you want very quickly, that's just a home run. And one of the projects that they work on is The Crown, which is it was a Sony Pictures project. So I love the work that they've been doing to support The Crown. And sometimes they have to spin up to terabytes worth of project work and then spin back down to support projects like that. And again, being able to have that completely different view of being what it means to be a studio going forward in the cloud. That's the kind of creative flexibility that you get. So that's kind of the first transformation story. The second transformation story I'd love to talk about, and probably everyone out there has kind of seen in the news about Viacom and CBS coming together. And of course, that's going to drive a lot of reinvention. And so when all of a sudden you have these major properties that are coming together, and you have like 425 channels that you all of a sudden now see across 40 data centers around the world, you have to ask that question: can we do this differently? And that's really the question that kind of Phil Weiser had posed. And that organization has done an amazing job of kind of reimagining what it would be like to be a content company. And that's a pretty, if you think about like a lot of the companies out there, they kind of have it all. They have everything from scripted, unscripted. They have music with the music channels. They have news and sports. They have everything in live. And we're figuring that out and what that content supply chain looks like with them. And it's a pretty exciting time for the work that they're doing across all their platforms. So it's a lot of work that we're doing with there. But if you could really optimize that content media operations piece, and instead of having the media operations in multiple different locations, by being able to have that centralized content lake and have access to that, that allows you tremendous flexibility on launching new channels, new direct-to-consumer offerings, and they see that, and that's certainly the direction that they're working on. And we've already seen promising results from that, as well as figuring out how do you do things like taking archive out to the cloud. So really great work there that we're seeing with Viacom CBS. The last one, which we have to talk about, is just tremendous work with Fox. And again, another transformation story. Paul Cheeseborough has been leading a tremendous team over there. And one of the things that that they've had to look at is, certainly the new Fox Corporation coming out of the separation from Disney. It allowed them to have the kind of the once in a lifetime opportunity of recreating what a studio is going to be like from ground up as a incumbent studio. And so they've taken that opportunity to ask the same kind of what if questions. What if we could take broadcast operations completely out into the cloud? What would that look like? How would we do that? And they have huge workloads. This is one of the companies that has almost more live content than almost anyone else in the world. They're dealing with over 60,000 hours of raw content a year. So what would that look like? And you have to spread that across and work those workflows through over 208 affiliates, your MVPDs and hundreds of head-ends, as well as virtual MVPDs as you're kind of taking that out to various digital distribution endpoints and direct-to-consumer. And so why I love this so much is just watching what this would look like. And so all of a sudden you're starting to be able to see inventions of things like doing uncompressed video end-to-end in the cloud, where we had to work with them to actually come up with something we call CDI, the Cloud Digital Interface, which allows us to have high performance, uncompressed video moving across the cloud as an alternative to satellite. And we're seeing huge benefits of this because once you get into uncompressed video, that's an important part of the workload for many reasons. One, it allows you to do more to the content while it's moving through the work stream. And second, you start to be able to move back from quality issues that you might have from too many encodes and decodes. So that's a really core capability. And it's so exciting to work with a partner like Fox to actually see that come to life. And I'm really excited to look at some of the early results that we're seeing on latency, which is pretty exciting. The other thing is just some of the more basic blocking and tackling, very similar to what you see with Viacom and with Untold Studios, being able to have your archive in the cloud. And we were able to move 8 petabytes worth of data in a really short period of time. And that's just so enabling to a company like Fox so that they could focus more of their attention on things like user experience and just so many great things that we're going to be continuing to do in the year ahead. So these are, Samir, these are just 3 examples of where I see tremendous work in both production, live production, and kind of some of these media supply chains that are being reinvented right now. What are you seeing? Because I think you spend a fair amount of time working for an amazing company that's also been launching a direct-to-consumer platform this year.
Absolutely. So, well, first of all, I love the call out for Fox, Eric. I love the call out too for the Cloud Digital Interface and CDI. I thought we were going to be handcuffed to premise, like on-premise deployments forever because of SDI, right? Serial Digital Interface. So it's really cool for you to outline that innovation. And I actually just totally lapsed that happened this year as well. So really cool. Shout outs. You're right. I love Peacock. I had the privilege of being able to work with the team on its build out this last year. And Peacock is one of several major direct-to-consumer services that launched in the past 12 months on AWS, right there alongside of Disney Plus, Discovery Plus, HBO Max, and so many others. But what really impressed me most about this deployment was that the customer was able to go from idea to implementation in less than 12 months at scale. And when I say scale, Comcast, NBC Universal released that they had 33 million subscribers on the service by December of last year. And you got to remember that they launched publicly in July of last year. So it's really mind-boggling to think about how quickly they were able to scale and how quickly they were able to anticipate and serve the demand that was generated. And their platform is very unique in that, of course, it serves VOD-based assets, but it also has live broadcast incorporated with social trending as well. It creates a really unique direct-to-consumer experience. So I think Peacock was one of the standouts for me personally this last year. And Eric, if we press on, because I know we're probably going to get short on time here soon, you and I might get the hook, but there's a couple other use cases I want to highlight here. The next one is Z5. So this really speaks to the evolution of dynamic advertising, which has been accelerated by this direct-to-consumer shift. And it's changing the way in which we can interact with consumers in a really meaningful way. And I love this because customers are leveraging it to drive real business outcomes like fueling their ad-based streaming services via targeted personalized ads at scale. And I can't tell you in the last 6 months how many discussions myself and my team have been pulled into specific to dynamic ad insertion. And I feel like this is going to be something that we're going to see as a trend continuing to propel in the months to come. The next example, if we move on to HeyYou, which is really cool recent one. I think this one actually launched publicly last week. It's HeyYou. If you're not familiar with them, they are an international subsidiary of NBC Universal, and they leveraged our AI/ML suite to increase viewer retention and subscription through personalization. So they're able to really leverage AI/ML in a unique way to be able to, again, create that next gen audience experience. But then they're also able to take the analytics that are driven by that and empower outcomes that feed back into that 360 view that you and I were discussing just moments ago. And Eric, I think the next slide that I'd love to talk about is not as much of a customer use case, but it's something that we talk a lot about at Amazon, which is like the ability to be able to look around corners and see what's coming next. And I think that this lakehouse architecture speaks to that. I'm hearing, candidly, the hottest topic that I'm hearing from my customers outside of what we've already talked about is how they can start to aggregate disparate and silo data stores across their corporations to better target and monetize ads, as well as leverage business intelligence to enhance their products and their service go-to-market strategies. So that's a mouthful. I know that's a lot to say, but you can't do that with hundreds of proprietary and isolated data stores across your organization. And I know that sounds, a heck of a lot less sexy than talking about dynamic ad insertion, but if we can start to break down these silos and these walls, and the AWS Lakehouse architecture really speaks to that, you can start to layer on some really interesting things like Amazon's Marketing Cloud and Amazon Data Exchange to serve customers and take it to the next level in terms of audience monetization. So this architecture, I feel like, is going to really pave the way for our customers to do really creative things around taking content data and turning it into metadata, enriching that data through catalogs like IMDb that will make search a lot more easier, and AI/ML on top of it to help with recommendations. And all of that, I think, gets layered back on into how we really talk to and serve our customers in this space in a really reinvented type of way. So Eric, I said a lot there. I want to hand it all back to you, and I would love for you to walk the audience through how you really envision this all coming together.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I just, in some ways, like this last slide is just like the perfect way of how it all comes together. Because if you think about it, what we really have is in kind of, behind the scenes here at Amazon, we think of kind of data driving almost everything. And I think you see that from like a workflow point of view. You see it from kind of an analytics point of view. You look at it from an automation point of view. And that's almost what you just kind of covered. If you listen to everything that we were talking about today, whether it's in kind of the content production space where we're kind of being able to kind of pull forward those pipelines, it's data at the core. And when we're getting into the media supply chain, again, between your title management, your data management, your data ops process, it's data at the core. When you get into direct to consumer, you're relying on data. So being able to have content lakes and data lakes behind the scenes and a thoughtful architecture, Samira, I think you hit the nail on the head. And that's, I think, the thing that's driving everything that you're seeing that's coming from us. So I hope you heard that from us today here at AWS, and you enjoyed this this presentation. We really want you to kind of have some takeaways out of this, because there's no way that you can learn everything about what we're doing in a short 30 minutes. But we really want to make sure you watch, engage your customers with live streaming built on AWS. This is a great session here at AIMER Summit, Spring 2021. Don't miss it. You're going to hear more about some of the specifics of things that we just covered today at a high level. Also, you need to make sure you go out to the AWS website. Go check us out on aws.com/media. Really great resources out there. So on behalf of Samira and I just wanted to say thank you very much for spending time with us today. We're really excited about the future. Couldn't be more optimistic. And if you're not from media entertainment, I would say this is the thing that I see a lot in the industry when I talk to peers that are out of industry. There's so many great lessons to be learned from things that we do in media entertainment because the cross-pollination. And now is kind of that time where we're thinking about audience engagement and how video has become a core part of all corporate operations. We're more than happy to kind of share what we've learned from our industry. Thank you so much for tuning in, and please make sure you give us take a little time to take the survey when you're done. We love to hear back from you, and we always like to make these sessions better and meaningful for you. So with that, thank you very much, and have a wonderful rest of the show.